Everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about the best beat-em-ups on the Sega Genesis. A few ground rules before we start. The games have to be in my collection, and I have to really enjoy them. So if your favorite one isn't on here, that's probably why. Alien Storm is awesome. It's a really fun beat-em-up where you're fighting off just waves of aliens. There are 3 playable characters. Each of them play a little bit differently. There is some variety to the gameplay as well, where you have these first-person rail shooter stages. Like many beat-em-ups, the game gets a little bit repetitive over time, but the rail shooter stages kind of help to break that up. You'll see a few other games on this list that have something a little bit different with their gameplay as well. What's really interesting about Alien Storm is the way that it was made. You'll see many similarities with late 80s beat-em-ups that Sega made. Alien Storm uses the same engine as Golden Axe and Streets of Rage. And it becomes very apparent when you really examine those games, as they all have 3 playable characters, they all have roughly the same number of stages, and that sort of thing. The Streets of Rage series is one of my favorite series of beat-em-ups. This game is really, really good. It's a spectacular game. The music is incredible, the graphics are really good, and I really like the gameplay in Streets of Rage. Like many beat-em-ups from its time, the story's really basic. These games didn't need a very complicated story at all, but there needed to be some kind of a reason as to why you're wandering around punching people in the face, and why those people might be bad guys. I'm not always convinced in some of these games that you're fighting the bad guys. Sometimes I think you're actually the terrible person, and these people are just trying to defend themselves. Streets of Rage is one of those games that I always assume was in the arcades, even though it never was in the arcade. It's strange to me that I always make that mistake whenever I'm looking these things up. There are many similarities between this series and Golden Axe, as I've already talked about. While I like the first Streets of Rage, the next one is my favorite one in the series. Of the original 3 Streets of Rage games, this one is my favorite. I've gone back and forth on this game and the first one a few times, but I think the second one is just a little bit better in my opinion. You fight the same group of bad guys that you did in the first game, which is fine. It really isn't all that crazy, and it makes more sense than several other beat-em-up game stories. This game has a few more playable characters than the previous one. Aside from that, everything really feels the same. It is kind of cool how they have Max in this game, and he's really just a clone of Hagar from the Final Fight series. It's really bizarre that they got away with that. I feel like Sega got everything right with this game. It's just so much fun to play. This is one of those games that I have a lot of memories of playing it. Splatterhouse 3 can be a ton of fun, but it can also be a little bit stressful because of the time limit. You have to go and save a character before the time limit expires, or you won't be able to get the best ending. It adds a level of stress to a beat-em-up that doesn't really need to be there, but it is kind of fun that it's there too, if that makes any sense. The game picks up 5 years after the second game, and Rick and Jennifer have a child who gets kidnapped by the Evil One. Rick uses the Terror Mask again to go and save his family. Once he defeats the Evil One, then he's got to defeat the Terror Mask, because, why the hell not? As much as I like this game and the series as a whole, there are some odd things about this that are a little strange, I think. It is a really fun horror-themed beat-em-up, but there are some weird things to it that are just kind of odd. Captain America and the Avengers is one of those arcade beat-em-ups that I didn't actually know was in the arcade. just because I didn't live near any arcades at the time, and I was more focused on the X-Men and the Spider-Man beat-em-ups. So this has a very comic book story, and it also has some shoot-em-up stages as well, so it breaks up the gameplay like that. It's pretty awesome. So the Red Skull has gathered a whole bunch of villains together in order to either take over or destroy the world. It's not really clear to me, at least when I was going through this. And you have to go through a bunch of different stages and beat them all up and then defeat a few forms of the Red Skull at the end. It's pretty great. Any superhero beat 'em up just feels like it's a ton of fun. I really love that you have all 4 playable characters in this, and I kind of wish that the game was 4-player. Just like Captain America and the Avengers, I wish I had known that the Punisher had a beat 'em up back in the 90s as well, because this one is really awesome. The Genesis port looks really good. It looks much better than some of the other games on the system, and it's a whole hell of a lot better than the NES version of the Punisher. There is something a little odd about this game, but it has nothing to do with the gameplay or anything like that. The gameplay is solid. It's the story that I just find a little strange. Because why is Nick Fury joining you and you don't have someone who I'm guessing is more involved with the Punisher stories? That could just be me and not following the Punisher comics and not knowing a whole lot about them. That being said, this is an awesome game. I really love it. I have it on one of the arcade 1-up cabinets I have as well, but this is just a really awesome game. Golden Axe is a classic, and it's also one of the video games that Sega has constantly cashed in on by re-releasing the first and the second game. When I first started collecting video games, I stumbled across this series because I did not play it in the arcades or when I was little. It's a lot of fun to play, and I remember, having a lot of fun with it when I was in high school. In this game, you play as one of 3 characters, and you've got magic for your super attacks. The more magic that you acquire, the better your super attacks are. That's pretty much it. Most of my memories come from just discovering the game and playing it with a whole bunch of my friends, and either laughing at it or trying to get as far as we could in it. And laughing at each other with how bad we were. It's a lot of fun to play, and it's a game that I still like to go back to every once in a while. I like this game a little bit more than the first one. It kept pretty much everything that I liked from the first game, but it made things just feel a lot better, especially on the home console. Golden Axe 2 is one of the many games that I learned about when I was in high school, and, just discovered it while I was collecting games, much like the first one. Because you get that little bit of, what is it? Like obsessive compulsive disorder where you just need to start collecting things, and when they throw numbers in there, you just assume that you need to collect all of them. I'm glad I don't do that anymore. Like the previous game, you've got your selectable characters, you still have your magic point system for your special attacks. It's a very familiar formula, and Sega did it really well with this one. There are a bunch of games like this that I remember playing with my friends, but Golden Axe 2 kind of stands out amongst the other ones. This might be kind of an odd one for some people to see on the list. And I know Altered Beast gets some flack today. It isn't the best beat-em-up in the world, but it's one that I really like, especially for an early Genesis game that really showed off what the system could do. You play as a Roman centurion who is brought back to life to save a goddess from some other jackass. It's not really important. All you need to know is you're beating the shit out of the things in front of you, and you need to collect 3 orbs in order to transform into some kind of a super beast so that you can fight a boss. That's what's actually important here. None of the other crap really is. Like a lot of other beat-em-ups, this is kind of a short game. It might take some time to adjust to, but it really isn't overly challenging. This is probably another strange one to have on this list, but I really like this game a lot more than I probably should have. It tries to do something with a Saturday morning cartoon, and I think the developers made a really fun beat 'em up. It can be a little frustrating at times, especially just choosing a second player is way more frustrating than it really needs to be, but it is a lot of fun to play once you get into it. While this is primarily a beat 'em up, there are some kind of shoot 'em up sections as well as platforming in this. This is often a recipe for disaster, but I think Toxic Avenger does a decent job with some of them. I don't think it did a great job with the platforming, but at the very least the shoot 'em up parts are pretty awesome. This is another really good game that's based on an R-rated film, and granted this is the Saturday morning version of it, but I think they did a decent job with it. In this game, you get turned into a cyborg, and if you win, you end up ruling a planet full of other cyborgs. All of you are too stupid to realize that you can possibly build something to get off the planet for some reason. Oh, and the enemy is a giant brain in a jar that you have to destroy at the end. It's a wild game, but it is a ton of fun. It is a very interesting beat 'em up just because of how big your sprites are, and you only really fight like 2 enemies at a time, so it's kind of weird like that. You can also rip your enemies' arms off and throw them back at them, or rip off their torsos and throw them at them as well. So it's kind of crazy. There's also some customization stuff at the very beginning, so you can decide what legs, body, and arm you want. It's an extremely interesting game, and I wish that there was more of it, or that it was at least given to us in a different form. Now we get to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, which has to be on every single one of the lists because their beat-em-ups are really good. This is arguably the best beat-em-up game on the Sega Genesis. It is a game that I didn't know too much about until I started looking for games on the internet. This is one that I found in the 2010s when I started collecting video games again, and it's really awesome. Like most of the other Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games, you're trying to stop the Shredder. He's got some stupid plan to take over the world or rule something or whatever, and you need to stop him. Blah, 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 whatever. So I thought this game was actually a port of Turtles in Time at first. No idea why. I was kind of dumb when I thought that. But hey, it's a completely unique game that does have some levels from Turtles in Time and the original arcade game as well. If you didn't like the NES version of Double Dragon 3, then give this one a try, because it is way better than that one. You can at least get somewhat far in this game without, mastering the damn thing. It's shocking, and I really love this game. This game's story always felt a little off to me because Bimmy and Jimmy had already saved their girlfriend, which they apparently share, and then she got killed in the second game, so they were getting their revenge. And now they're going on a globe-trotting tour to gather the Rosetta Stones because apparently they're completely over their girlfriend, or this is how they grieve, by going on a stupid adventure to gather Rosetta Stones to stop some evil thing from doing stuff. I would think going to therapy would be a much more rational approach to this, but I also don't beat up people for, fun. Growl is a game that I wanted to like a lot more than I did. It's a really fun beat-em-up game, but unfortunately it's single player only, so you can't really play with a friend, and the game throws so many enemies at you at once that it can be a real struggle to get through. But then it gives you these amazing explosions, and the graphics are awesome, and then you've got a bunch of little, animals that help you fight the boss. It's amazing. So you play as one of 4 park rangers, and you just go around beating the shit out of poachers. Everyone likes beating the shit out of poachers, so yeah, this is a really great game. For some reason, Mason Saga Mutant Fighter reminds me of the Guyver or MD Geist. Absolutely no idea why. That's where my mind went when I first saw this. It's actually a spin-off of the Mazinger Z saga, the Mazinger Z series, and this is adapted from the Mazen saga, which is its separate manga, but also uses characters from Mazinger Z. I hope that I got that right, and if I didn't, please tell me how stupid I am in the comments. The only bad thing about this game is that it is a single-player beat-em-up. And there's a reason why it's a single-player game, and that's because the boss fights take place on a one-on-one fighting game screen. So having two players on this would really give you an unfair advantage. So while I understand it, it kind of sucks. So that was the list. There are a bunch of other really good beat-em-ups on the Sega Genesis that I have not talked about. I'll eventually get to those at some time. Maybe I'll revise this list if I go through more and I find something that deserves to be on here. I wanted to minimize the number of single-player beat-em-ups, and thankfully the Genesis doesn't have too many. And Growl and Mazen Saga are both really good, despite being single-player games, which is always kind of annoying for a beat-em-up, but those two are very, very good. I really wasn't surprised by anything on here. I guess if I had to say one thing was surprising, it was probably Double Dragon 3 being as good as it was on the Genesis. That was kind of different, and I didn't see that one coming. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what some of your favorite beat-em-ups are, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.